You're listening to Alternative Talk, 1150 AM.
Welcome back to Get Real, your resource for real answers to your residential mortgage and real estate questions. This is Eric Robison, joined with my co-host Frank Percival, and I'm delighted to introduce our next guest, Mary Anderson. She's a broker with Windermere the past 15 years, and she has the designation of Senior Real Estate Specialist, and she was a founding member of Windermere's Senior Transitions Program. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to be here.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
We both are. And Mary, I've got a question starting off. So this is a new thing for me. I hadn't heard about this senior accreditation. So can you tell us, first of all, what distinguishes you from other realtors? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I think that anybody that works with seniors really has to have a slightly different temperament than a traditional salesperson, because those transactions usually you can spend up to 6 months, even a year and a half, building that relationship before the senior feels comfortable doing business with you. So you have to be very patient, and you have to not back away from hearing stories more than once. You have to really be able to engage with people. So you have to have a certain temperament. And I think it really makes a difference if you've had real life experience. Before I ever got into real estate, I had 15 years with my own business that was a home services business, and 30% of my clients were seniors. And they're a population that I really enjoy working with. I enjoy their stories. I feel like I get to hear a little bit of living history every time I work with a senior.
It sounds like the patience and the enjoyment would be linked in order to be successful
Absolutely.
in this kind of work.
Absolutely. You really have to be willing to kind of engage with people and understand it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would you say is about the most significant aspect of working with senior citizens then?
Well, I think the senior market, that it's something that people have to understand. It's not just people who are 65 plus. The senior market actually has three distinct components. It's people who are close to retirement or just past that retirement marker of maybe 65, 68. They're very active, but they decide that they want to downsize. And they want to stay in a home or they want to move to a condo, but they're very active. They really want to be a homeowner still. And then there's the market that happens with people who are probably middle to late 70s on up to 90 plus, where they're slowing down and they don't really have the energy to own their own home and don't want the responsibility. And they oftentimes are looking at what other kind of senior housing is available to them. So as a senior real estate specialist, one of my jobs is to be familiar with those other kinds of housing options that are available, from retirement communities to adult family homes to low-income housing apartments. There's a whole host of things.
So you get down and you can talk to them about all of them.
I know
good,
a lot
what's
of
bad about them.
Right, exactly. And then the third market is actually adult children, because oftentimes it's the adult child who ends up having to handle the estate. And oftentimes adult children live out of town. Right. And they come into town and they've got to find a realtor who will work with them and who can work unsupervised and who can pull together whatever might be needed to get that house ready to put it on the market. So you have
and
to
obviously a realtor who's got some knowledge of working with seniors is going to be of benefit to them, since they
absolutely, absolutely, because you have to have a lot of compassion for what somebody's just gone through. If they've lost a parent,
an emotional time.
Very emotional, and it's a huge loss. Oftentimes for the adult children, it's a huge loss for someone who's lived in their home 40 or 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've mentioned that there are three categories of clients, and you just described them. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going to be important to each of those different categories in terms of looking for a home to buy? Just expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, so when someone's downsizing, they still want a home that they're going to be somewhat actively involved in. They may not want something as big. They may want something that's on one level. They want something that they're not going to have to spend a lot of time maintenance on. They don't want the big yard anymore or the big garden. They want to be able to, lock their door and they're gone and everything's fine. And so sometimes
I'm liking the sound of that. Actually.
Well, actually, it's like
I'm not
what I want to do
but I love that
as well.
Right. So sometimes what's really good for people is they move to a condo, but other people really don't have the temperament to live in a situation where you've got to answer to a condo board.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have their own place. When someone has, reached their mid-70s, they usually start having some concerns about health. Mm-hmm. So where am I going to live? What's going to happen? What kind of community of people am I going to have around me? And it's always good if someone's still healthy to be in the position of making a choice.
Right.
Should I move to a retirement community? Should I look at a buy-in at a continuing care community? And that's a retirement community where you actually put money down and you have a share, kind of like a co-op to a certain extent, except that you're not going to get that full share back when you move or when you're deceased. Your heirs won't get that. But what a continuing care community does have is that you can rent an apartment. You have assisted living help if you need it. There's an infirmary if that's needed. There's just a wide spectrum of care. It's all right there. You don't move again because everything you need is right there in that community.
I would think, well,
I'm sorry, before we get to the last category of the adult children and what needs they're looking for, I want to expand a little bit on the retirement community. Now, my in-laws live in Arizona, and they used to live in a town that you had to be 65 and older to purchase. Do we have areas like that in Washington State?
Yes, we do. In fact, my in-laws bought into a development just outside of Marysville, where everyone had to be 55 plus. There's a wide range of housing out there. I mean, you can actually own your own home, have sold it, and there are low-income properties through SHAG that you would qualify to rent for because they're looking at, yes, you have a certain amount of equity or resources, but your income is really reduced, and so you qualify to move in.
Well, I just think just listening to everything here, you would be just a great resource just to have them sit down with and talk with about all these options, because as opposed to trying to go out and go to each one and getting this huge sales pitch from them, you would be just this, because you're not obviously benefiting from if they go to a lot of these facilities. It's just that you're trying to give them the option of understanding all their options.
Right. And I also have professional people that I work with whose job actually is to help people find a place. That's their job. And generally, placement works so that the senior is not paying the fee, but the retirement community pays the fee, or the adult family home pays the fee. So there's a lot involved in terms of working with this population. You have to have a very broad database of
So do you
resources.
find a lot of them then, like you said, these relationships could be a year and a half. So obviously they're approaching you very early in the process just to even assess what's the possibility of selling their home. And then you kind of say, well, there are all these other options out there that they might not have been considering, or have they?
Absolutely. Well, what I always start with is let's put a plan together. Let's look at your finances. Do you have a financial planner? Have you worked with someone who can look at all your assets and figure out just exactly what you're going to have to work with financially? And then I say, let's look at your health. I just was talking to somebody last week, and it was an adult son, and he had called and he said, well, I think my parents probably want to move to a condo, or they want to move to a ranch-style house, a rambler all on one level. Well, as we went further on in the conversation, it got really clear that Dad's health was such that wasn't a good idea, because Dad had some dementia issues, and Mom was starting to feel like, oh, whoa, this is way too much. I'm totally trapped. And I said, you know what? You need to, first of all, verify what are the health issues that your dad has. And then you need to look at what kind of support Mom needs so that they're moving to a community that has what they need, not just Dad, but what Mom needs as well. And she's too isolated. If she's already telling you she feels trapped.
Actually, those two questions you just say I find really interesting, because I personally was with an estate attorney this morning with my siblings, and that was the estate attorney brought those two questions up, and my mother was there and posed those questions. So you are giving really good advice.
Yeah, this is very timely for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I might have to talk to you after the show.
That's okay.
I just have a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
So you mentioned creating a plan for the seniors, a long-term plan. How often or does ever the concept of a reverse mortgage factor into that plan?
Well, I have a lot of bias about reverse mortgage.
Let's hear those.
I don't think they're good for everybody.
Right.
They're good only in some very limited situations. And it really depends on the person and their health and what their living situation is. I had a neighbor who had a reverse mortgage, and it was perfect for her. She was very active. She had a large home where she could actually rent part of it to a tenant. So she had income from that. She had income from the reverse mortgage. I had an uncle who got a reverse mortgage, and somebody saw him coming. And as he aged in his home, it got really clear he would have been better served if he hadn't gotten a reverse mortgage. He had taken the equity in his home, and he had moved to a retirement community where he could have gotten the health support that he needed. So it really...
that's the trick. If
Right.
At some point you need care, and if there aren't the finances for that, a reverse mortgage isn't necessarily going to help.
It's not going to help because you have to stay in that house
Right.
Right.
for a reverse mortgage to be really...
Right, because if you leave, then you have to sell.
It's due.
Yeah.
And if you leave and there's, not a lot of equity left and you need equity for care, then it turns out that it's not such a good idea. So I really suggest to people they have to really be honest about what is your health situation and what do you think it's going to be like in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So, would you say there's any certain trends you're noticing then currently with seniors?
Well, I'll tell you, the country is going to have a silver tsunami. Actually, it's already started. We have 10,000 people a day turning 65 in this country.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a huge number of people. And many people are not thinking about, what's it going to be like in 10 years? Maybe I'm 65 or 67. I just retired. Oh, thank God, blah, blah, blah. But then they hit a health bump. And what's your plan? If you haven't thought that through, you could find yourself being very isolated because what we all need is community, regardless of how old we are.
Right.
And there's a lot of mistaken notions about what a retirement community is. People have these visions that, I'm going to the home. You're not going to the home. It's totally different than what it was 20 years ago.
So
Yes.
for anyone putting a retirement plan together, and part of that retirement plan should be taking into consideration where they're going to be living.
Right.
Who's the first person they should sit down with? Should it be a financial planner? Should it be someone like you who specializes in real estate planning for senior citizens? What are the steps one should take when they're starting this process of planning?
Well, what I suggest is start with a financial planner, get real clear about what your resources are, and start with your own health and take a really good inventory of that. Are you going to need 5 years from now? You're going to need more support because you have Parkinson's or you have diabetes or you have some other long-term health care problem that's going to kick in and be more debilitating than it is now. And then I suggest working with a realtor who works with seniors on a regular basis so they can help you look at what has to happen next. The biggest thing I hear from people as to why they can't move, oh, I don't know where to start with all this stuff.
Right.
Well, guess what? You don't have to start with all that stuff. You start with the money, you start with your health, and then
You make a decision.
you make some decisions, and you can always move by just taking what you absolutely need, and the rest can be gifted, it can be given away, it can be thrown away, it can be recycled, and you can have an estate sale.
Mm-hmm.
So this is new to me. I literally late last week, I heard from a realtor I've known for years who emailed me that she was going to start specializing in senior advising for real estate purchasers. I didn't even know it was a thing before. And then here we have you on the show, which I was excited to learn about it. Where do folks go if they don't know you and they don't know my friend Tony who's doing this now? Where do they go to get information about this? Or how do they start? How do they find you or somebody else who does this?
You can find me on the web at marypanderson.com, or you can find me at windermere.com, or you can go to sres.com, and that's Senior Real Estate Specialist.com, SRES. Then you go in, you put the city, you put your zip code, and magic, up comes a list of agents who have that SRES designation. And, whatever you do, spend time talking with the person and finding out, do I really connect with them? Do I feel comfortable? Do I trust them? Because that's the number one thing that you need to do is make sure that you feel comfortable with them.
Well, Mary, I learned so much here just talking to you just now. I really appreciate you coming today, but we're going to have to take a brief break. We're going to be right back, though. This is Eric Robinson and Frank Percival with Get Real.